All right, thank you, Dr. Parker, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. It's always a pleasure to be around like-minded individuals who are seeking to learn more, and who I believe have a genuine interest in this topic. If you'll give me 1 second to share my screen, then we can get going. And if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see that title screen. All right, great, great, great. So I'd like to begin by asking each of you to think back to and remember a time when you felt that you did not belong. I'd like you to think back to what it felt like, to actually go back to what you experienced and to relive kind of what made you feel that way. I want you to hold on to those sights and sounds and feelings and all those memories that might be flooding back right now. And hold on to those as we explore the lived experiences of Black undergraduate music education students in predominantly white schools of music. And just to make sure again, you all see a screen that says introduction, right? Okay, great, great, great. So my interest in this topic stemmed from my experience navigating the exclusively white field of music education. During high school, I participated in numerous ensembles and honors clinics. And while I enjoyed and benefited greatly from these experiences, I always found myself asking one question over and over again. And that question is, where are all the people who look like me? I was in jazz honors groups playing what was traditionally Black music and was the only Black person around, to carry on what I thought was that Black tradition, and was always the only one in the room. So I was painfully aware of the underrepresentation of people of color and often felt just alone, invisible, and isolated. During my graduate studies, I was introduced to the writings of scholar activist W.E.B. Du Bois, and immediately took to his idea of double consciousness. His depiction of Black Americans' unreconciled strivings and feelings of two-ness perfectly described my experiences as a Black student in a predominantly white school of music and in American society at large. It was these experiences and my interest in Du Bois's work that led me to ask, what does it mean to be a Black student in a predominantly white school of music? And what are the experiences of other Black students in these settings? So I designed this research study, which was my dissertation study, to answer these questions, and actually to kind of tell the story of what Black students endure um, when they audition for and become members of these institutions and conservatories. So essentially, at the heart of this study lies the question, what does it mean to be Black in a predominantly white school of music? And there's many research studies and articles and opinions about the negatives of music education and how white it tends to be. But there were no studies that allowed this question to be answered by those who were best positioned to answer it. So our young Black students had no voice. They had no narrative. Um, and so the rationale for this study was to fill that void in music education research concerning their lived experiences, and to add to the existing literature about the Black experience in higher education at large. So again, the purpose was to answer the question, um, and to understand how Black undergraduate music ed students make meaning of their lived experiences in predominantly white schools of music. How do they describe their experiences? So there were two real questions that I'll spare the research jargon, but there's two questions that kind of guided this inquiry. What makes the experiences of Black students unique? And what meanings do they ascribe to their experiences? As I mentioned earlier in the introduction, I relied heavily on Du Bois's double consciousness. And so before we jump into it, I want to kind of give an overview of double consciousness and the main aspects that I focused on of this theory. So Du Bois's theory is based on the premise that racialized individuals, their self-concept is substantially affected by the way they're viewed by members of the dominant population. Essentially, as Black people or racialized individuals, we view ourselves through a lens of how we perceive white people to view us. Um, and Du Bois went on to explain that this can have negative impacts on our self-esteem, our identity, and our identity formation. Three main parts of double consciousness that most scholars and writers agree on. The first is the veil. So uh, Du Bois described the veil as a barrier on which white Americans projected their negative perceptions of Black Americans, essentially stereotypes. Du Bois proposed that Black people process these negative projections as they formed their self-concept, leading to an internal battle, or what we see here, two-ness, this internal conflict or identity crisis. Du Bois asserted also that Black people use their understanding of these negative projections to better navigate white spaces. So just to give some context there's been some research about Black students in predominantly white institutions going all the way back to 1965. Essentially, we've learned that Black students in PWIs experience a great deal of race-related stressors, as we can all imagine or have probably experienced. Um, Tremendous issues with cultural adjustment. Um, Not only are these environments demographically white, but they're culturally white. They're based on the ideals of European society. Um, Also academic issues, okay? And of course, overt and sometimes explicit and not so explicit racism and discrimination during their time in PWIs. Very little research has been done about the Black student experience in predominantly white schools of music. And PWSOM is a term that I came up with to distinguish a predominantly white institution from a predominantly white school of music. For example, UNCG, where I currently teach, is a minority serving institution. It is not classified as a predominantly white institution. However, once we look at the School of Music, it is decidedly white. Um, very few Black students, very few minority students in this setting. So PWSOM is a term to kind of explain or to illustrate that the schools of music, regardless of their campus location, are steeped in a Eurocentric tradition. What we found is that isolation and loneliness is a huge running idea. Blatant and subtle racism, racist jokes, unequal distribution of time, attention, and information. And these students felt rejected, frustrated, devalued, and disheartened. Now, this is probably nothing new to a lot of us in here, but this research is not discussed a lot in music education. Now, a note about the music curriculum and what I mean by music education. So you can go to school to learn how to be a performer. That was one of my bachelor's degrees, jazz performance. But a music education degree means that you are learning to be a teacher, and it results in licensure. You go into the school system. And so the music curriculum in general has some issues. And so I'm going to kind of try to sum them up really quickly. The entire way we do music in school, from kindergarten through your PhD program, is based on the Western European conservatory tradition, a tradition that was started in the 1700s and has not changed at all since. And when I say has not changed, that's not an exaggeration. It has not changed. We're steeped in music theory, which is learning how to write music, learning notation, learning the science of music, and music history. Now, a note about music theory. In music theory, there's a strong emphasis and a strict adhering to the rules and practices of European musical traditions. Okay, things that you might hear in jazz music or what we might consider Black music would be against the rules and what we learned in music school. So the current curricular model of music theory operates like a self-serving system. It only values the practices of white males from one corner of the world, Western Europe. So this superiority of white males is continuously reinforced. And as I said, musical traditions that don't align with these practices and values are viewed as inferior, and we'll see that a little bit later on. As far as the history, lots of history lovers in the room, so it's no surprise that history is always studied from a temporal lens. We're looking at time always. Music history is no different. In music history, we divide everything up into historical periods: the medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, classical, romantic, 20th century, and all these names come from European history, and each is characterized by European values and practices. So, in essence, in today's music education curriculum, even the exploration of music history is only approached through a lens of Western classical temporality. So if it doesn't fit this idea of Baroque and classical and Renaissance, then it does not happen, or it has not happened. So the advents of Indian music theory or history do not show up in textbooks when we go to school. Therefore, any other type of music has no history, or its history is considered not worthy of study. So music inherently has a race issue. Okay. Even at HBCU, this curriculum is the same. Add to that the idea of being the only person in the room who is Black. Um, this is a qualitative research project. And my whole point here was to describe the universal essence. How can I reduce everyone's experiences to one small phrase? What is the one phrase that sums up the experience of being a Black undergraduate music education student in a predominantly white school of music? So that was essentially the purpose of this project. And we'll get to that closer to the end. Um, I had 9 participants. We had 3 interviews with each participant. And these interviews ended up being very emotional, and lots of tears were shed. I've heard, my father is a historian. I've heard stories of things that he lived, and and all that. And I was quite surprised to find that it was really no different years later in 2020, still dealing with some of the same types of issues. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. Before we really get started, just want to let you know that all names of places and participants and institutions are pseudonyms, okay? Just for the protection of all the participants who feared retribution and actually their professors, their white professors, finding out they talked to me. So after the interviews and analyzing the data, I came up with 7 different themes. The first theme was this idea of having to navigate the negative perceptions of white people. And this speaks directly to Du Bois's idea of the negative projections and the veil. All participants were painfully aware of white students and professors' negative perceptions of Black students, and they fought and combated them daily. They altered their speech, their appearance, their behavior, and some even isolated themselves to protect against negative perceptions. One example is the way that Kimberly hesitated to choose a Black accompanist for her jury performance. Now, to give you some musical context, the jury, every semester as a music student, you go before a jury and you perform pieces that you've prepared. And you either get the thumbs up or the thumbs down, about whether you pass or not. And so you sit before a jury and you perform. And Kimberly was a viola player. And so she needed to hire an accompanist. And here's what went into her thinking when selecting one. What is a jury panel going to think with a Black viola player and a Black piano player? Should I get a white piano player so they think maybe I paid more money, think that I committed more to what I was doing? You really start to question yourself in this internal battle. Speaking directly to Du Bois, not really sure of anything right now. So consistent with Du Bois's double consciousness, we see how closely Kimberly's concept of self was tied to perceptions of white people. In her mind, having a white piano player meant she spent more money and she was more committed to what she was doing. So, in this one quote, it sums up the idea that her value was directly tied to her race and those decisions she made based on race. The next theme that came up, making white people comfortable. And this might seem familiar to many of us, but all participants explained that a huge amount of their energy was devoted to making white people comfortable. Many believed there was an acceptable type of Black person, one in whom white students and faculty found comfort, and they worked daily to present themselves as acceptable, often at the expense of their own comfort. So these participants equated the need to make white people comfortable to wearing a metaphorical mask or an alternate persona that every time they interacted with someone in the School of Music, they had to put on. So for Bryson, this created an internal conflict. He recognized the importance of wearing his mask for survival in this environment, but admonished himself daily for doing so. He explained, I don't know. The only word that's coming to mind is dirty. It's kind of shameful. The audacity of me to change myself for someone else. It's frustrating and gross that it kind of subconsciously happens. Jesse was very explicit. I dress plain to make them feel comfortable. I talk white to make them feel comfortable. I straighten my hair to make them feel comfortable. So I go on later on in the article to explain that Jesse felt that there was an image of acceptability in these settings or an image of professionalism and that she did not match it because her hair was not straight and she dressed loudly. So she dialed it back to make everyone white feel comfortable with her. She went on to say that when she straightened her hair, she received remarks such as, wow, you look so pretty with your hair straight. You should do that all the time. So for her, it was a constant value judgment based off of her hair and her physical appearance, which is so strictly tied to her race. Now, another thing that was very prevalent was this idea of having to work harder to prove myself. So in response to negative stereotypes and perceptions, all participants felt this need to work harder to prove themselves. Kimberly fought daily to prove that she was worthy enough to be there. They felt pressure to work harder to prove that Black people could succeed in predominantly white schools of music. And the pressure to work harder led to high levels of stress and anxiety amongst almost every single participant. In fact, Kimberly no longer studies music and left her program. And at each participant at some point expressed wanting to quit. Working harder to prove myself. Now, the fourth most prevalent theme was, do I belong here? Direct quote from, I think, 5 of 9 participants. They felt that they didn't belong because they were always having to prove themselves, because there was so much overt racism and discrimination, because they were always being singled out for being Black, asked to speak about Black topics, asked to point out Black or African countries on maps. And because of the problematic curriculum that we spoke about earlier and the invalidation of Black music at every turn. And importantly, also because of the underrepresentation of Black faculty. Kimberly explained, it's like you walk into a restaurant looking for your family. You don't see them. So you turn around and leave. It's like that's not where you're supposed to be. And that's a really anxiety inducing and stressful situation. It almost doesn't feel safe. But no one has explicitly told me that I don't belong. But it's like I've almost been shown in every way possible that I don't. Another word about Kimberly, the idea of never seeing a Black professor made her question whether she should even be trying to be a teacher and follow this path of music education. More about the curriculum, Taylor expressed, we're trying to fit into this space that doesn't want us, and that affects our morale. I can see this is not for me because I don't see me in any of these classes or curriculum. It's possible to go through any music curriculum at pretty much any school that's not an HBCU and never see a Black professor. In fact, I'm the only Black male professor in the entire School of Music, full-time professor at UNCG. This had a tremendous impact on most of these participants, but especially Taylor. The fifth theme to emerge was this climate of racial and cultural insensitivity. What it boils down to is just pure racism, racist jokes, racial slurs, and sensitive comments on a daily basis. So when they discussed their experience, most participants described a climate of racial and cultural insensitivity. Many described being on the receiving end of racist jokes, slurs, comments, and overt acts of racism on nearly a daily basis. Participants hesitated to make their concerns known to school leadership and faculty. However, on the rare occurrence that they did, their concerns were always met with inadequate responses. In some cases, they were told they were simply being paranoid. Doreen explained, this is just one of many stories. Even the professors would make comments. They say stuff like, this time play it like Asians. Somebody said something about Native American people, and someone else said, didn't we kill all of them? It was just all white people in the room, and it was laughed off. Doreen went on to explain that no one expressed any disapproval of the comments, which for her reinforced the idea that this climate of racial insensitivity was normal and acceptable in her School of Music. It was in the culture. It was a part of what was expected there. All this led to a distrust of white faculty. Participants expressed that they do not trust their white professors. And while many admitted that their distrust of white people existed before attending a PWSOM, it was intensified by their interactions with white faculty. Doreen and Sally distrusted their professors because of their roles in fostering these environments. Jessie felt that many professors made disingenuous attempts to show that they were accepting of Black students. And these attempts only reinforced her distrust. Essentially, she didn't like that they were trying to be what she described as woke and to present themselves as not being racist. Many participants said that they would not have participated in the study if I had been a white researcher. Doreen believed that a white researcher would discount her experiences. Bryson believed that a white researcher would be unable to conduct the research without bias. And Sally did not trust that a white researcher would be able to identify with, understand, and interpret her experiences responsibly. So essentially, with so few Black researchers in the field, we have no way to get their stories out because they don't feel comfortable even talking about their stories and experiences with white faculty or researchers. Doreen went on to explain there was another girl and she was white. Her name was Doreen also. And we played the same instrument. And someone asked, so how are we going to tell them apart? And she said, well, we could just call her Black Doreen. So every time she passed me in the hallway, she would say, what's up, Black Doreen? Or hey, Black Doreen. But then I just kind of would just keep walking, or I would just smile at her. For Doreen, it was clear that she existed not simply as a student in her School of Music, but as a Black student, which contributed to her sense of not belonging again. And lastly, this last theme, really important, this idea of sacrifice and survival. So having listened to all of these examples of Black jokes and racist behavior, I just asked them why they even stayed. Or in Sally and Doreen's case, why did they come back? They actually left their school for these reasons and then came back a year later. Most stated that their decision to stay was an act of sacrifice. They consciously sacrificed their own comfort and mental health just to say they obtained a degree from a reputable institution and to serve as examples for future students of color who could actually get through these environments. In fact, if we have any members of fraternal or organizations or sororities, Taylor described his experience as crossing the burning sands. For those who might not be, who aren't familiar with that, is that phrase crossing the burning sands refers to initiation processes, typically grueling ones that one has to endure to get to some goal or to the other side. And that's how he described his experience, his 4 years at predominantly white School of Music. So after coming to these themes, I decided to kind of analyze them through what are called the four lived existentials. This idea of looking at the lived body, how they physically existed, the lived space, the lived time, and their lived human relations. So to really understand their experiences, I needed to look at how they physically existed at this particular time and how they interacted with those around them. For example, the lived body, the skin color was the largest representation or illustration that they were different. In fact, Bryson went on to say, "You can't escape being Black." It's something that I always have to think about in my School of Music. Now, as far as the lived space, the School of Music building, these participants all were at different schools, but it was the School of Music building that represented the stage upon which they had to don their metaphorical mask. It's where they felt out of place, and they could not breathe or take off that mask until they left. Live time. So participants, they processed their present circumstances based on their past experiences with racism, which might not seem like a large surprise. And they also viewed their present as preparation for future race-related stress. In fact, Marion, what we haven't heard from yet, went on to say that it's hard, but I just look at it as preparation for what the world is going to be like when I get out of here. And finally, the last existential, this idea of human relations. Students could not be themselves, or being themselves was incompatible with also being a member of the School of Music. So they were at all times out of place physically, and just in their interactions with those around them. So the purpose of this study was to end with the essence. What does it mean to be a Black student or Black undergraduate student in these settings? And after my interpretation, the essence that I arrived at was Black undergraduate music education students in predominantly white schools of music living a dissonant existence. Dissonance is a musical term meaning inharmonious. Their existence, their entire being was inharmonious with the dominant culture across all existentials of lived body, space, time, and human relations. So based on this study, there's some recommendations for practice. Only 7.05% of future music teachers currently are Black. And only 3% of faculty, tenure track faculty, are Black in schools of music. So there must be concerted efforts to recruit Black faculty and students, and also to establish relationships with local music programs that cater to Black communities. Something that's happening now is this idea of reimagining the music curriculum and what is acceptable music or acceptable for study. The last one, which I think is the most important, is the idea of the role of faculty. So participants actualize their existence in the schools of music through interactions with their faculty. And this study illustrates the need for faculty to understand the influence that they have over Black student experiences. And it further illustrates the need for mandated trainings related to implicit bias and microaggressions. Recommendations for future research. It wasn't the purpose of this study to look into imposter syndrome, but I found that all participants had characteristics of what's been called imposter syndrome, including feeling like a fraud, a sense of competition with white peers, and this idea that they're always going to find out that I'm not good enough to be here, or that I was a quota admit. Also, this idea of intersectionality of race and gender. The Black female participants had different experiences than the Black male participants, including being asked to smile, being told that they were angry and aggressive. And so it's worth looking into how gender could intersect with race to affect these experiences in future research studies. So in conclusion, examining understanding and valuing the lived experiences of members of marginalized populations provides valuable insight into issues of diversity and inclusion in our colleges and all our schools. Through in-depth interviewing, this study established that Black undergrad music ed students in predominantly white schools of music live a dissonant existence. Participants displayed characteristics of double consciousness and questioned if they even belonged in their schools. So at the beginning, I asked you to remember a time that you felt like you did not belong and to hold on to those feelings and briefly relive them. And I would imagine that the thoughts and feelings that came back were not positive or comforting. However, those feelings illustrate what it meant for participants in this study to exist as Black students in predominantly white schools of music in 2020. I believe that all students, regardless of race, should be afforded the opportunity to thrive in our schools of music and not merely survive. And that is it. Thank you. I guess at this time, I would entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Hi, I don't have a question, just a comment. I thought that was brilliant and thought-provoking, and I actually went to UNC Greensboro for
Okay.
undergrad. And I knew a lot of people in the music program, and uh it's just, yeah, I that I don't know, I just that gave me a lot to think about, and well done.
Thank you so much. I do want to point out, I work at UNCG, and just want to make it very clear that these are not students from UNCG. These are students from other parts of the country.
Got it.
Yeah.
Outstanding, Mr. Parker. I just have a comment. This is Horace Johnson, one of your dad's old school friends from back in the day.
Yes, sir.
I see not much has changed because I remember integrating the school. Not much has changed because integrating the school system, when they got ready to get a band director over at the junior high, they went with a man who was at UNC as a music, I'll just say his first name was Bob. When they had a qualified music teacher like Mr. Moore, who had graduated and went through all the steps he had to get his degree, but they overlooked him and went with a guy who did not finish school. And there's nothing wrong with not finishing school, but to get a job as a teacher in that profession was just obscene. And that was pure racism. And that was here in Hillsborough, Orange County.
Yes, sir. Mr. I have a student. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think he's through, Quinton.
Okay. I have a student, a graduate student who just presented at the North Carolina Music Ed Association a presentation about Black band directors, and Clark Edgerton and Caleb Moore. And part of that history was that there were two music ed associations. There was a Black band director one and a white band director one. And each did their own thing. And at some point, they came together. There were articles of, I don't want to misspeak, but they came together, and the agreement was that they would have new officers, a new constitution. But what happened was they ended up keeping the white organization's name, the white organization's constitution, and that is an organization which I'm a member now. Every band director, every music person in the state is a member of that organization, and the Black organization was erased at that crucial time when there was a point to join. And Mr. Moore, as I understand it, was right there when it was happening. Yeah, I can send that forward. I think that'd be interesting. Y'all can.
And sadly, sadly, you mentioned the erasure of the history because Mr. Moore's history at the Stanford Junior High, all the trophies his band leadership got destroyed and thrown away, never to be seen again. It's just sad.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Parker, this is Sandra
Yes.
Wilson, and I just want to say outstanding presentation. Your academic research for your doctorate, really, you could put almost any profession in that, whether music, government, corporate world, science. Unfortunately, that is the experience of pretty much everyone on this screen who, whether you went to a PWI or not, just living in society or working and navigating your way through the world as a Black person or African American in particular. I applaud you for this kind of research. I had a colleague when I was in the military and after I left who did she has a doctorate, but she did part of it related to the same kind of experience that you're talking about with African American women in the senior executive ranks of the federal government. And most of those findings would be very similar to yours. And so I look forward to talking to her about this and reminding her her research is very much like yours in the music department. And for those who, I just watched the series on Hulu called Black Cake. There is a profound example for the young man who's moving up in the science world who experiences exactly what you're saying, because in most of our cases, if you are in a world that is predominantly white, any profession, you're going to run into that kind of thing. And unfortunately, we lose a lot of young African Americans because of the mental stress, the loneliness, the isolation, and just the hostile environment in general. Because no matter what you're doing, no matter how good you are, it's never good enough in some people's eyes. So applaud your research, and congratulations on this effort. Hang tough in that world.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Parker, Dr.
Yes,
Quinton Parker. Thank you. That's beautiful. I really enjoyed that. I probably should have majored in music, but now hearing that is good. I didn't. I went to school on a music scholarship, but I didn't major in music. And of course, I later in life became the first person of color to be hired in Orange and Chatham as an assistant district attorney. And just hearing you think about times where you felt that you didn't belong is interesting. I never felt per se that I didn't belong, but I heard comments like, when I came back from maternity leave, why were you out for so long? I thought you all just laid down in the field and pushed the baby out. Somebody said that to me. I know exactly who it is, and I'll never forget that. I had water knocked over on my prosecutor's table, and person refused to pick it up or clean it up. And I mean, it's just a rare things. Had a local judge say to me, I know your parents only let you watch Amos and Andy. Said he couldn't refer to me as Snow White. I mean, the list goes on and on, but it's unfortunate that we have to go through that. And I guess I did have imposter syndrome, because for a long time I had this recurring dream that I hadn't passed the bar. You know, you wake up and sweat. It's like, oh my God, you know. No, I think the last one I had was just before I retired. I mean, you know, it just went on and on. But interestingly enough, feeling like you don't belong, how about just today, just before I logged on a little late because I was chasing down a guy who's on my driveway that has 5 no trespassing signs at a minimum. And of course I chased him down, asked him why he was there, all that kind of stuff, asked him if he saw the signs. And he had the nerve to tell me that he felt like he was being attacked. And unfortunately, I had to go there and tell him, I'm sure you see this skin that I'm in every day. What do you mean you feel like you are being attacked? I said, you're lucky I got in the car and came. Usually I pull out my shotgun. But you know, I'm on my private land, in my private space, and that isn't even good enough. Land that I pay taxes on. Yeah, that's not good enough. I mean,
Right.
it's crazy. But I
I
did
think,
shake him up pretty good, and I intended to.
well, good for you. I think I in preparing for this presentation, I realized that probably everyone on the call would this would be nothing new. But what I found out is every time I've presented this and when I was published, this research was published, um, for some reason, people think we live in a post-racial society, post-Obama, and don't realize that these things still exist. And in some ways, they're more subtle, and the same mental effects are happening to our students, and even professors and faculty who genuinely would want to help don't even see it. They don't realize what the microaggressions look like. They don't realize just what's happening sometimes right in front of them. So the idea is not that any of this is new, but that this is years later, and my research is no different than what we found in the first published study in 1965 about Black student experiences, and that not much has changed. It's just a little bit more covert. So I will say I wanted to share a discussion question. And do I have time to do that?
Yes, all means.
All right, so if you look at, it'll show up in your chat box, but I'll read it also. Um, I wish Dr. Shanklin were here dealing with masks, but building on the idea of wearing a metaphorical mask, have you ever felt the need to
Yeah, I'm here,
present?
Quinton. I'm
All
here,
right,
Doc.
all right,
We're here. We're a
all
little
right.
late. We're here, though.
So building on the idea of wearing a metaphorical mask, have you ever felt the need to present a different persona in academic or professional spaces just to be accepted? And, you know, if so, how did this affect your sense of authenticity? And were there specific aspects of yourself that you felt compelled to hide or modify? And I guess we'll just open it up.
Well, Dr. Parker, we want to, congratulate you on this study. It's very important to see where we've come, and not very far from what we've learned tonight. The metaphor of the mask has always fascinated me, and so to connect with your presentation is really interesting and allows for introspection. So, my question is, what has been the response of your white colleagues to your research? Have you had any discussions with them about it? And what do you think is their basic, what are your takeaways from that interaction?
So I was actually a student at UNCG, and I finished in the fall of 2021. And the reception was on its face very positive. In fact, they hired me before I finished and actually defended the dissertation. So it was a welcome topic, and everyone seems on board with it. And I can actually say at UNCG, they're making changes, at least in our area, music education, that are benefiting students. I guess my fear is that, you know, with such a long history of understanding that these are not hospitable environments, Black students aren't trying to go to UNCG or to predominantly white schools of music. And so, we've had these conversations about how do we recruit more minority students or more Black students, and making it more inclusive. But I guess the next question or the next study is, is the word already out? Is it too late? For because Black students have kind of figured I can go to HBCU, get the same curriculum and be comfortable. So the conversations are happening. The reception has been great. Um, whether I'm presenting internationally, nationally, or on the state level, or just in my department. So my other fear is that this is a passing fad, and that people will stop wanting to hear about it after a while. But I keep talking about it in everything that I do. So hopefully we can keep the conversation going.
You know, you kind of have to wonder if the mask is on among your peers, and you know,
Mhm.
considering the nature and results of your study, and what we're hearing from the students, people can say one thing and actually do another behind closed doors. So, um, I'm gonna be thinking about this presentation for a while now, because music is us. We originated music, and I don't have to preach to you about that, but for them not to want that kind of input, and is and the for Black students not to want to uh, come to that university, or white major white universities where they don't feel comfortable and have that expression. It's just mind-boggling right now. So I look forward to talking to you personally about that.
Yes, sir. I guess before I go to the next hand up, I will say that I'm actually waiting on a book chapter to be published that I'm working on, where I look at this study and my experiences. It's called "I Too Wear the Mask," and I have to admit that I have spent many a night wondering, was I hired to be the solution to the Black problem? Um, and I spent some time really dealing with that and trying to work harder and prove to myself and everyone else. Um, and so in the chapter, I go into detail about when I was in the PhD program, I felt like it was a competition. You would have thought I was going out on the town somewhere. I cut my hair before every class. I was dressed up, but not too dressy. I prepared myself for battle on the way. And I was cutthroat in class. I was going to answer everything, and everyone would know. And I treated every interaction with the faculty member like a job interview. And in the end, I got the job, but I I still wondered, how much of this is I'm the solution to their problem. So it's I don't think I'll ever completely be over it. And there's plenty of masks to go around. Yeah, so this is Miss Wilson.
Yes, I have a question and a comment. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill back long before you were born or even thought about, probably. And it was interesting because the numbers at Carolina at the time were roughly, I think, 20,000 students, 1,000 Blacks. So you can imagine a massive university where you really are invisible most days. There are so most of the Blacks at UNC, and to this day, I think, migrate to the South Campus. And we pretty much lived in one dorm, Hinton James. Uh, if a lot of people have heard of that. I spent 3 years with Judge Scarlett's sister living in room 516 in Hinton James dorm. Um, and that's still the reputation today. But it was interesting. A lot of young Blacks at the time, back in the late 70s, who did not live in Hinton James their freshman year, found out about Hinton James. And then because they were so isolated, they migrated or applied to move to South Campus and to move into one of the dorms where there were other Black people and other minorities, I should say, but predominantly of Black students. So it was very isolating to be at a campus university that large. And so we kind of cleaved together for a sense of community, a sense of seeing other people like yourselves, a sense of safety,
Mhm.
and a sense of being able to quote go home after your classes or after day, roaming around on the larger part of campus. And many people don't think about that, but it was a small or group of us, and when I say small, I mean the large majority of Black students who lived on South Campus really spent a lot of time together studying or partying together or going to, different events together. The sororities and fraternities were also another source of belonging and feeling like you had a safe space in such a large white space. And Hinton James is still that way to this day, and has that reputation. You asked the question about in the comments about feeling a sense of wearing these different personas, and you do, no matter where you are, because when I was in the military or in the federal government, I would have to be one way in a professional setting and be, amongst my friends or colleagues after work or on the weekends or whatever. You could kind of let your hair down and be who you really were. You could breathe, if you will. That's a better word. You could actually breathe because everybody's watching for your mistakes, watching for your you to step over something, or finding a way to denigrate your work. I remember being hired for a very specific job that no other African American had been hired for, and I would get the question, well, who do you know to be able to get this job? What did you do to get this job? And basically you just have to say, I worked harder than anybody else. I applied just like anybody else. And in one case, I didn't even apply. My boss recommended me, who was a white person. So, I think we will live that life, that persona in this world. The best you can be is try and be yourself in all environments. And if you're in a professional environment, just keep it professional. I tried not to be anything that I wasn't. And but what I did want to ask you was, in your study in a predominantly white institution, especially music, have you partnered or benchmarked with other PWIs across the country in similar programs to see if there are similar efforts or ways of moving forward as a community of African Americans in a predominantly white space such as music in a university and academic setting?
Well, thank you for that. There are some efforts. The book chapter I mentioned is a book chapter all about the Black voice in music education and providing a platform for the Black voice. So it's all contributed studies. I'm sorry, not studies, but chapters about the Black experience in music education. There are so few of us in music education, in music in general. Only 3% of all faculty who are doing research efforts are Black, and then even less in the specialized field of music education. So we pretty much kind of know each other or know of each other. But so there are no research efforts yet. There are some in the making, but that I can't talk about quite yet. But one that I am doing is a quantitative study partnering with a white colleague. We're looking at the effect of race and gender in auditions. And so we've sent out a survey where we have students playing and performing a small piece for a minute long, and we've kept the audio the same for each performer. The only thing that changes is the video. And so whether it's a male identifying, female identifying, Black or white student, and just in some of the early results, we're seeing differences. We're seeing, even though the music is the same, what the person sees significantly affects the ratings that they get. So it's a lot of irons in the fire. So there's so many ways to go because the results are the same as 50 years ago, and so we're really at square one doing it all over again. So just trying to take one step at a time, I guess. But I think that's a great idea to collaborate with other faculty at PWSOMs.
I think it was Quinton, was Horace, then Beverly,
Yes.
then BB.
All right, thank you, Dr. Parker and Dr. Parker Jr. I wanted to comment on the two things he asked about was the feeling of not belonging. I think when I first integrated the school system, I felt that I didn't belong only because I wasn't accustomed to that environment. I wasn't accustomed to going to school with white kids. They definitely weren't accustomed to going to school with me. So I felt out of place initially, just why am I here? It wasn't anything they had done to me until the teacher asked me to decide whether I'd rather be called nigger or negra. But the second most important thing that you delved into was the mask. Did you feel like you had to mask, change? And I'm just curious. I didn't know I was going to have to change and develop a mask, but I realized after a little time that going to that school, I would become one person when I entered the campus. I couldn't be the person that I was when I was at home, free going, fun loving, laughing, joking, having fun with my friends. The moment that I started out the door toward that school, a different mask had to come on. In some cases, and there were other people in my culture who didn't like the fact that I was down there, to see a study on what that has done to people who would have first, and anytime you start having to wear a mask, it's the first time. But I would just like to see a study on the psychological effects of some people who had to develop 3 masks or 2 masks. It's like split personalities. You're this from 7 to 3, you're somebody else from 4 to 8, and then somebody else. And it's because that's how you have to learn to be accepted, fit in, and fight back emotions that say fight forward instead of fight backwards. Lay down, take it easy. Don't just keep taking more. And during my time, there was no guidance counselor that you could go to and say, I need to talk. There was just come home, get yourself in the bed, do that homework, get back in there tomorrow and bring home some good grades. And nobody really understands the psychological warfare that being in that environment, the damage that can do. And your dad's this program was the first time I let it off that I got a chance to even talk about it, and it did a world of good to heal me on the inside because it can be damaging. And I just want to thank you again. It was an outstanding presentation, and those questions helped me to get some more out. So thank you, young guy.
Yes, sir. I'll add that a couple of students said that they were too white for the black people and too black for the white people. And they never fit in. They had those 3 masks. And there is a study that looks at the psychological term is going to be schemas. And they talk about the schema or perceptions or paradigms of thinking that evolve from existing in these places in double consciousness. If I think about it, I'll send it forward and maybe we can send it out. But yeah, I think it was
Beverly.
First, I want to say thank you, Dr. Parker. This was marvelous. It brought back a lot of anxiety and just I want to scream and holler and cry. I want to show you this. Can y'all see it?
Yeah.
Can you see that it's a person taking off her mask? I came across this. I don't even know how I came across it, but I found a way to print it because I wasn't supposed to, but I felt this way. So I went to King's College in Charlotte, and it was basically a finishing school and a trade school. And my major was fashion merchandising. And I wanted to be a buyer when I got out. And South Square Mall had not completely opened, but they were at J.C. Penney's. They were looking for buyers. So I went in and applied. When I went in and told them what I wanted, they didn't say anything. It was a look on their face. And I did apply for that position. I still haven't heard from them, and the mall closed and they knocked it down. So I guess I never hear from them.
50 years ago.
Well, yeah, it was. So then I went to I actually started working back at Orange High School because I couldn't find any other job in my field. And working at Orange High School, I made $7 and something an hour. And I wasn't making enough because I wanted to pay off my school loan, which was a little over $1,000 at the time. And I did that. I did do that, but I was looking for another job. So my father asked his cousin, Fred Cates, if there was any position for me at the mill, which was Hillsborough Textiles at the time. And I did get a job there. And I got a job there because I got a job there for a quota. Now, mind you, at my house, we didn't talk about race. To the point that when my sister first went to the white school, she was in 3rd grade. My mama asked her how many Black kids were in her school. And she said 1 in her class. And she said 1. And Mama said, "You the only person?" And she said, "No." And she gave the name. And I'm not going to tell you who the person is. But she gave the name of the person that was in the class. So, and with that said, when I was in grade school, I always got this stuff about my skin color being too light, my hair being better than everybody else's. And so from there, so I'm saying I even got it from Black people.
Mhm.
And I did wear that mask at work. And the mill was was bought and shut down. So I was forced to get a job. I went back and worked at the mill when somebody else reopened it. And that was the first time that I can say that I had overt racism knocking at my door. My manager or office, well, the mill manager told me one day that his son was, I forgot how he put it. And I said, "You mean he doesn't like Black people?" And he said, "Yes, and you better be careful." I said, "Well, if anything does happen, it's going to happen in Hillsborough. And if anything happens to me in Hillsborough, he won't live to get out." But, that was thinking on my feet. I didn't feel like that. Of course, I felt threatened. And at that time, I was crying all the time. I was crying. One of my friends told my direct boss that if he saw me crying again, that he would wait for him to come off of the property of the mill. Now, that's what he told me, told him, but I'm not sure about that. Then I got a job at UNC. And it was the best job I've ever had, considering it had benefits. And somewhere along the line, I was laid off. And I felt like that was racism. And I took them to court. And I was so hurt by it that I could not speak up for myself. So thank you for bringing this up. And in the meanwhile, I'm just so that everybody will know, not that you have to, but I am like 49% introvert and 51% extrovert. So I can roll either way, but the older I get, the more I need to come home and I need more me time so I can take off this mask. I hate talking about race because normally when we talk about race, it's about me. And I am a tribal member of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, Indian tribe, for y'all who don't know. And my good friend and our new mayor, Mark Bell, invited me into his swearing in. And he told everybody that he had invited me in once he had a time to speak, and he thanked everybody. And he said that he had invited me because I was a tribal council member of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, and that he wanted to remind people that they were walking on Indian land and to respect that and take care of the land. Now, I really respect that. But once again, I was in the limelight about being Indian. So this really let me know, because there are a lot of times that I think about what side of the fence do I need to be on. And there's a lot of times that white people ask me how I feel. Sometimes they're trying to make me feel comfortable. I mean, and trying to be too nice. Just leave it alone. Let me be me. So thank you.
Right, and thank you for sharing too.
And I was thinking about, have you thought about why people don't get into the field of music? Like you, I mean, is there a reason why, let's just say that, and I don't know that she did not, but let's just say that Beyonce did she go to school for music? Or, I mean, I realize that a lot of people are really talented and just can go out there and sing, but it's more to that. It's more to music than just singing. So have you come to any conclusions about why singers like Prince, let me see, what is his name? Smokey Robinson, why people like that do not go into music school? Now I can tell you, but most of the time why Indians don't go into that is they probably don't even know it exists.
So I think that there are some people who I guess I agree. There are some people who would surprise you that they had some study in music school. Miles Davis, for example, went to Juilliard, never finished. He was making more money and learning more playing in the streets of New York in clubs, um, following the jazz tradition, simply because what he wanted to do was not as available to him in Juilliard as it was in real life. The jazz curriculum in this example is very whitewashed, and it is now still. Um, so he was able to get the authentic thing just by doing it and living a jazz lifestyle. I would venture to say Smokey Robinson, what they wanted to do was not available to them in schools of music. It's not considered worthy of study. It's mood music. It's not anything that has any substance to it. At least that's the prevailing thought um, amongst music theorists and historians. So I think mainly because the music that they enjoy is it's not available to them. It's just not there. Jazz did not become available until with in, in scholarly, like in higher education, till in some places really 70s and 80s. And so, and even then, it was not quite the same as the authentic thing. So we're
So,
just now getting, I'm sorry, we're just now getting schools that are looking at pop tech. So UNCG has a popular music program now, and and it's considered revolutionary. It's just happening. And we've been having higher ed music for, since the 1600s. So we're behind the ball, but I would venture to say it's because popular music was not available, and the only thing that was considered worthy of study was Western European music.
Okay, Bibi has a hand up.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Well, first of all, Beverly, I was touched by your personal account, and thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Parker, Quinton Parker, I I'm glad that you mentioned intersectionality in your presentation, and not just in terms of gender. But I was curious what were your findings related to not just gender but also sexuality, class. I know lots of areas of higher education are pretty classist. So do you gain any, like I said, class, even class?
So
We will.
if I can jump in and ask, so you're kind of breaking in and out. Could you put your question in the chat or in the comments? Because we just can't hear it all. That might help.
Hold on.
Okay. Okay, great. That's a great question. So my main focus was race, purely race, because to jump into sexual orientation, class, nationality would have been a much larger endeavor. So not in my research, but there is research being done for each one of these areas. Um, uh, in the Journal for Research in Music Education, you can find a lot about all of these. In fact, I have a student in my qualitative research class who's looking at social capital, cultural capital, class, and how that affects musicians' experiences. So the research is being done, but I haven't personally done any research related to gender, sexual orientation, class, nationality. About okay. So yeah, they did not come up. They did not come up. The idea of uh, gender did come up with female identifying participants, but class did not come up. Um, Nationality did not come up. Sexual orientation did not come up. The prevailing identifier for them, the thing that determined what kind of experience they would have, was race, or at least that's what they felt comfortable talking to me about. There's a whole nother thing. If there's another identity with which I don't identify or share with them, they might not feel comfortable talking to me about it. I want to share something I think we're all familiar with. Um, and it was the inspiration for the title. And this is Paul Lawrence Dunbar's "We Wear the Mask." Um, so I learned this in fourth grade. And it kind of always stuck with me. And that's why I think this topic stuck with me. Um, and so I just want to look at the first two stanzas, the idea that we wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. I think it really speaks to everything that these students experienced. The idea that this is the mask that I have to wear, and it hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. I had students actually say, I cannot let them know how I feel. I will not ask them for help because then I'm confirming stereotypes and confirming what they believe about me. And so I just kind of wanted to leave that with us, to kind of think about this poem as we interpret the experiences of the participants in the study.
Okay, I think that when we talk about the mask, it is absolutely deeply rooted in the institution of slavery. When we look back at the interviews with former slaves, interviews that were conducted in the 1930s, one of the things that they point out is the fact that they had to wear the mask. As a matter of fact, in looking at those interviews, one scholar concluded in a book entitled From Sundown to Sun Up. From sundown to sunup is really when the Black community, the Black slave community was made. The real Black community between sun up and sundown would be the time that they had to present themselves in a manner that would not lead to them being beaten, that would not lead to their wife being raped, that would not lead to them in some kind of way being persecuted by their slave owners. So they had to wear that mask, from the time the sun came up until the time it went down. But from sundown to sun up is when they were themselves. When Sandra talked about the fact that you had to go to the South Campus to be yourself. We know that started way back in the 1960s for Gerald and some of us who were in the Upward Bound program way back in the 1960s. We knew that South Campus was where you wanted to be, rather than over, near the center or north part of campus. But enslaved people had to wear the mask. We continue to wear it through Jim Crow, and we'll continue to wear it. I don't know. I can't think of a group of people in this country who wear the mask better than formerly enslaved people, formerly people who were formerly segregated and pushed to the depths of the ocean like Black folks have. So we know how to wear that mask. We do it well. In 4 or 5 different situations during the course of a day, we might wear 4 or 5 different masks. So we're deeply rooted in knowing how to present ourselves. Are there any other questions or comments for Dr. Parker?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, Brother Obi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quinton Parker, for your presentation. It took me back to the early part of my life, as my professional life in gospel started when I was 17. And I had to listen to a lot of put down from professors. They would ask me, "Oh, you play well, but what university did you go to?" And even the weekend that my first time that I played at the Apollo, they said, "But that's nice, but you really need an education. You really need to." And I personally took it as an affront, and I just told them, I said, "Well, to each his own." I was comfortable in gospel, and I could tell from their conversation that to them gospel didn't matter. And so those conversations ended. but I did feel, put upon, and that because gospel was the music that I was raised up, and it's all I knew. And I remember my senior presentation at Orange High School. Me and James Walton, Kenny Chavez, one other person, we did My Girl. And when I finished, Miss McKee asked me, she said, "Why am I just now finding out about your gift, Obi?" I said, "Ma'am, I made a choice. It was either the Glee Club or the road, and I chose the gospel road." So again, sir, thank you for your presentation, your work, and just continue to struggle for us. They still have to wear the mask. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
I just had one more comment, and Mona and I were talking about. We had a conversation about folk art versus, fine art. Folk art being almost like jazz and other gospel, where it's coming from a place when I say they, mainstream, PWI, whatever, people that grew up in a different environment just can't connect with and appreciate. And because we all know it's only one race, right? And basically music it's basically been, I guess, assigned to, for example, race, when music is just music. So, that's my only comment about that. It's just, would I be appreciated, Dr. Quinton Parker, and feeling free to explore the kind of music that's within me at UNCG? I had to get that rhyme in there. and leave that with you and see how you react to that.
Your question was, would you be free to?
Yeah.
I would say yes. It's a struggle to change the system. We actually just added, you're usually a jazz person or you're a music ed person. And in fact, I had to get 2 different degrees because we didn't have a way to mix them when I was at North Carolina Central. We just created a program when I got there where it's a jazz instrumental music education concentration. So you can be a licensed teacher and still pursue jazz instead of making classical your only background. And so we have a pop tech music ed program where you can be a popular singer or you can be a beat producer and still get licensed to teach. Actually, that program is forthcoming. It's on the way. And so we have a jazz program. We have, but by far the largest program is the classical area, but that's going to be the same everywhere because that history has been there for so long. So I would say you would be free to study the music that you wanted to study, but the system we're still making it better. We're still making it better. But I will say UNCG is ahead of the game compared to a lot of other schools. And not just because I work there.
Beverly?
Thank you. Did I miss this, Dr. Quinton? Did you tell us what your major instrument is, or whether you're a vocalist or?
Definitely not a vocalist. My primary instrument is trumpet. And so I've played trumpet since 6th grade. But when you become a band director, you have to take classes to learn all the band instruments. And so, I can do a little something on all of them, but trumpet is my primary.
I want him to be a drummer. I bought him a drum set, way back when he was 4th grade. So I was a drummer, but he decided to go a different route. And I'm glad he did. Okay, are there other questions or comments? Quinton, any last last words for us?
I think I'll leave it with the words of Paul Lawrence Dunbar. I'll leave that there.
Okay. Well, we thank you. Thank you so very kindly for your presentation. A good way to end our 2023 Information Plus Hour. We are very proud of you. I see your mother is on, so she's very proud. Definitely, we're proud of the fact that you've gone on and continue to do exceedingly well. Let me reiterate the fact that Beverly Scarlett is making a presentation. She's the keynote speaker January 14th at 6 o'clock at the Friday Center, MLK presentation. I did mention earlier, Gerald, that your exhibit will be down at the Orange County Historical Museum beginning Beverly Payne.
January the 14th through February 29th.
Oh, during the entire month of Black History Month, Gerald's presentation will be down at the Orange County Historical Museum, the masks. Joe, how many masks will you have there?
I'm gonna have about 22, 23 of the ones that I made, and I'll be bringing some a few masks from my private collection of African art. And I just would say, you know, regarding masks in African culture, you know, you basically, it's just part of the, and I made this point during my presentation with you guys, that it's just part of the costume where you transcend being into the spirit world. You're basically connecting. You're just connecting, and where we for this presentation, we're talking about the mask, the you know, of trying to change your appearance to somebody. You know, it's not, it's a difference there in terms of the African mask wearing, you know, for ceremonial purposes of connecting with the spirit world, for example, or nature. But, you know, it's sad that we have to wear, in this culture, in this environment, have to disguise ourselves and our feelings.
Okay, thank everybody again for coming out tonight. And as I indicated from the outset, I do have this video that I want to show, and we're going to start it right now. Please stay with us until the end. I appreciate it very much. Okay, we're about to share it with you now. Thumbs up if you can see it. You now hear this okay?
It sounds low to me, Dr. Parker.
Sounds low. Yeah, this is low right here, yes, but can you hear the music when it's playing?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay.
Where's your head? Where are your feet? Are you male or female? It's a man right here. get right into this edge, but see that little crevice there? Each right here. Just see if your hand will fit. Yeah, see? Yeah. You want to see if your hand fits. This is my dear antler. That's how I carve. Yeah. You want to see if your hand fits? Right in there and thumb right there. How does that happen? It fits everybody. Yeah. Yeah, universal. One size fit all. And these are from the people that people described as savage.
Like this.
All right.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, that kind of sums up what we've done over the past 18 months. You know, you got to put everything in, you got to have something in memory. You can't just let it stay out there.
From all those pictures, Freddie, it looks like we barely did anything. All we did was party and play.
We did for about 45 minutes yesterday taking these pictures.
Well, I did want to say that, I am moving to Philadelphia, but, I will still be very much involved with this group and attending the Information Pluses and Freddie's classes starting in January. And, you all have just been so wonderful, and I've been so touched to be and honored to be a part of your group. So I hope, just because I'm moving doesn't mean I'm not still going to be involved. But thank you all.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming out on the last Information Plus hour of the year. We look forward to a presentation in January, February, March, and continue this thing. All right. Wish all of you will have a beautiful holiday break. I want to thank Dr. Parker, Quinton Parker, for his wonderful presentation again tonight. Absolutely appreciated to the utmost. See y'all the next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Want to stay on for a few minutes, if you will. All right. How you like our Information Plus setup? For some reason, I don't hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I got so many different microphones.
Oh, really?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, let me stop the recording, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. All right.